I've built many great products that didn't solve a real problem and wasn't really something that people wanted. And they were still like really great products, like the fit and the finish and the quality and like the website animations, like that to me is half of it, right? Is building a really beautiful product. And I think if you were looking for specific advice, if I was to give like specific advice on how to get to that level, you have to have extremely high standards. They were exceptionally high. Our MVP was simple, but the standards were exceptionally high. The app, the website, like the flow for the user, the customer service, it was all top tier. Opposite. When you're first starting out, you want to write as little software as possible. I mean, a really easy way of thinking about software and code is that all code is debt, like all of it. And there's like a curve, right? So at the very top of your pricing curve, there may be, very little users who are willing to pay for it at that price. And so there are a lot of products, and this is something that I don't think founders really think about.
So hey John, how are you? Hope you're doing well.
Doing wonderful. Thank you so much for having me. You were super persistent, which is wonderful. I think you send me an email like every 3 months for the last while. So glad we were able to make it work.
Oh yeah. So it does piss some people off. I email a lot of people who I'm really excited for, and some people get pissed off. Some people appreciate it. So yeah, it's a mix of.
Yeah, I mean, I would say if someone's getting angry about getting hit up for a podcast, then they have a unique personality set. I think there are a lot of things in this world to be angry about, and someone interested in talking with you and sharing what you have to say is certainly not one of them. So I wouldn't worry too much about it.
Oh yeah, definitely. Awesome. So I think let's get into it. So who is John? Who are you?
My name is John Andrew. I am 26. I just turned 26 a few days ago. Candidly, I think I'm like the output of building companies and startups for such a long time. I started building my first company when I was 13, 14, and it's what I became passionate about. And so I've inhaled every piece of information. I've been a venture-backed CEO since I was 18. I've raised quite a bit of money and made a lot of revenue and built incredible teams, which is really really what is the result of everything is obviously the team and the work that they do. So I would say that's who I am. I mean, I'm an entrepreneur, and I love building companies. And I've been fortunate, very, very fortunate in my short life so far to have done fairly well.
Keeping this info in mind, everything you've built right from coder to wonder now, I think they're great products, incredible products. So I'll just ask you, what is a great product?
Yeah, a great product is something that delights. When I build a product, I believe in this idea of what is the best version of something. So even when I was a kid, right, when I started my first company, I was 13, this little game server company. I would spend hours and hours and hours perfecting every single little piece, every single little user interaction. And I think that that's something that a lot of founders can fall into, right? Is it's sort of a mix between creating an incredible product that people love, but also, of course, shipping something and making sure that you monetize it and iterate it. And so I've always been generally pretty good at both, right? Is sort of shipping what I think is a quality product and then iterating on it continuously. But in terms of what is a really great product, it's something that delights the user. It's something that sort of redefines what is quality, what is unique. I think one of the interesting things is that a lot of times to create a truly great product, you actually have to create a new model or a new sort of strategy around an existing business, right? So you can get a lot of businesses and products that are sort of constrained by your strategic choices. So I'll use a really great example. Let's say that a certain device was made of plastic, and that's all it's been made of for however long. And you released this plastic product and everyone used it, and you've iterated the version of plastic over and over and over again. The only way to make it better is to have a strategy shift and say, hey, let's make this out of titanium, right? And so I think that a lot of building a great product candidly starts at your beginning strategy and beginning idea. And if you look at like what Wander is, so Wander is now my second venture-backed company. We're about 2.5 years old. We've raised about $40 million. Like we are verticalizing the short-term rental industry, right? So it's this whole idea of taking these incredible homes, operating them ourselves, and distributing them to customers ourselves, as opposed to a marketplace like an Airbnb or a VRBO, where the operations are done by a third party. And so the reason why we did that is because I thought that there was a strategic decision to operate the homes ourselves and deliver a really perfect and beautiful product experience, as opposed to a different strategy choice like those have made, where obviously they have far less control. There are a lot of challenges in something like that. It's way more logistically complex and all that fun stuff, but our customer satisfaction is incredibly high, and that's what a great product is. It's something that delights. So,
but how does that correlate with you build a great product? You think from the scratch you are doing something which practically no one has done on the surface. How much of it is really dependent upon the industry that you're in?
Yeah, I mean, I think that obviously, what is a great product in different industries is certainly changes, right? So like in a services business, let's take accounting or consulting, it's about like the quality of work that the people do directly for those clients, right? That's a great product. It's not your website. It's not anything else. It's like the quality of work. If you're a lawyer, right, it's like, did they win the case or not? In software, it's like, how is the user experience? How fast is it, right? How's the bugginess or whatever else? To that end, that's why I think that like the true definition of a great product is something that delights your user. If you hire a lawyer and you win your case, you're delighted. If you hire, a consulting firm and they give you the right advice, which typically never happens, but let's say it does, you're delighted. If you use a piece of software and it works, you're delighted. And so I think that obviously the tactics and what it means to build a great product specifically differs by industry, but the actual effect to the user is always user delight. And I think that's also what should help keep you focused on what to actually build.
Before product market fit, we were talking about what a great product is. So let's say you discover what a great product is, which at the end of the day satisfies your customers. How much of it really is dependent upon the problem that the product is solving versus the UI or the UX or the user experience?
Yeah, so there's two answers to it. So number one is I've built many great products that didn't solve a real problem and wasn't really something that people wanted. And they were still like really great products, like the fit and the finish and the quality and like the website animations, like that to me is half of it, right? Is building a really beautiful product. And I think if you were looking for specific advice, if I was to give like specific advice on how to get to that level, you have to have extremely high standards. Like if you think about a Michelin star restaurant, right? And that chef on the line, every single dish that's coming out is like meticulously looked at and understood. And he's wiping down the edges and it's going out to the table. And if some little piece of parsley falls off the salmon or something, it's like, the plate's coming back to the kitchen, it's being redone, it's going back out. If you want to build a high quality startup and a high quality product, you have to have those same standards. I mean, to give you an idea, every piece of customer feedback that comes into Wander goes into our Slack. We have like 70 people, and I am in there tearing it apart. Like, okay, like everyone's like, yeah, but we got a 9 out of 10 on the feedback. And I'm like, yes, but here are 7 things that we could do better. And not just here are 7 things that we could do better, but like, what is the timeline on it? How quickly are we going to get these things done? And you create this sense of urgency and these incredibly high standards. And that goes across everything. Like from the font that Wander uses to how fast our images load, like I am constantly looking to perfect this experience, this product. And there are so many things wrong and so many things that could be better. But that would be the first piece of advice I would have, is raise your standards through the roof. Like if you look at Stripe, for example, and like their website, it's beautiful. It's like pixel perfect. And that's because like they have exceptionally high standards. Apple, for example, like the new iPhone, it's like meticulously crafted. It's beautiful. And that's because they have incredibly high standards. And so that would be the first thing I would say, is that like you need to have incredibly high standards to build a good product. You need to, and if you don't have incredibly high standards, you need to learn how to find them and really harness it. The second piece to your point is that you have to build something that actually solves a problem. So I think you can actually build a very high quality product that doesn't do anything, right? Like a piece of art. But the next piece, of course, is then you have to build a product that solves a problem. It's very difficult to do both. And there's a lot of iteration and finding where exactly is the problem, and like, is there a need, and all these different things, especially in saturated industries, or if you're not doing a new business model. So, to that end, in terms of which one matters more, it just depends on your goals. Like if you're an artist, then just build a great product that sits in a corner, no one needs to use it. If you're highly ambitious, then you need to build both. You need to build something that solves a problem and is incredibly high quality. But like I said, if you end up hitting it, you build a high quality product and it's also something that people need, then you went into the problem of scaling it. And then you have to build a high quality machine, right? It's like what Elon Musk always says, is that like, it's very easy to build a prototype. It's hard to manufacture. And it's the same thing in any other business. It's like you build that prototype, people want it, and now you got to manufacture it. And so you end up having to build a very high quality machine. It's actually another really interesting point is like when you look at the internals of like an Apple computer, they're beautiful. No one's ever going to see it, but they're beautiful. And so it's very much like that. Like, the front end of a Wander looks beautiful. And then behind the scenes, the team needs to be exceptional. The operations need to be exceptional. Then you get into scaling it. It's almost like a whole nother product, is the engine and the machine behind the product that's scaling it.
You talked about raising standards there. The first day when you worked on the MVP for Wonder, you think your standards were the same as they are now?
They were exceptionally high. Our MVP was simple, but the standards were exceptionally high. The app, the website, like the flow for the user, the customer service, it was all top tier, because what we were trying to prove is that, was there an opportunity to build a new level of experience within the vacation rental space? That being said, when I talk about simplicity, like the calendar, as an example, was like a little bit slow, or wouldn't be able to scale to like 100,000 checkouts. But it was an exceptionally good user experience. And the homes that we had were also exceptional. We launched with, I think, 3 homes, and each one of them was truly special. It was truly iterated. But those things that we did to get that live were very much like getting your hands dirty. I mean, I remember setting up the first home, and it was like I was up till like, 4 or 5 in the morning every night, like working on doing it alongside getting the product done, the marketing done, everything else, to prove that there was something here. And then the moment there was, then you shift again to scaling it. And so my focus turned from like setting up the initial platform to redoing everything. I mean, even like our initial payment system, like we had to entirely rebuild. Like as we scaled our chat system, like Wander has our own internal chat that we built out so that you can talk to concierge. And like soon we're going to be implementing like these large language models inside of it. And so it's like, as you scale, you have to rebuild things. Your, architecture is far more complicated, but the standards and the user experience were always exceptionally high. I actually don't think that an MVP is an excuse to have a bad product. I think it's an excuse to have a very simple product. That's why they call it the minimal viable product, but like it still needs to be good. Because if you build a shit product and you hand it to a user, it's like they're gonna be like, this is bad. So the goal is to find like something that's that works, it's simple, but it's still very good.
What is simple?
I mean, that's only a question that can be answered when it comes to like each individual product. But there are certain architecture decisions that you can make. Like, for example, let's say I want to start an e-commerce company, right? Like the next Amazon. Do I go and build that myself, or do I like use Shopify, right? And the answer is, it's like maybe at some point I need to switch off of Shopify, and that's far less simple. But to start with, I'm going to use Shopify. And that doesn't mean that it's ugly or anything bad. It just means that it's like far more simple from an architecture perspective. And to be clear, like Shopify can scale to incredible, size. So it's kind of a bad example. But that's what I mean is like, can I use third-party tools? Can I do this or that? Like, how can I get this product live as quickly and easily as possible? And also, if I have a huge feature list, can I really shorten that so that I have like one or two that are really good, one or two really good core features that people are excited about? So that's what I mean by simple. I mean like something small and good. Like if you're in the software world, it's like, I love this idea of just like tiny little tools that work really well, and then you expand on top of it. If you're in the hardware world, it's a little bit more complicated, but you start with that prototype. So I think simple is like, you have to, I don't want to say you're cutting corners, but the architecture is just not scalable.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I think you talked about using third-party softwares there. I'll touch upon that. A lot of what I've noticed personally, felt, I think, is there are a lot of founders these days, like when there are a lot of third-party options available, they are resilient towards using them. They want to build everything from scratch. I think that originates from having full control. Do you think you feel that, and is that really helpful?
I feel the complete opposite. When you're first starting out, you want to write as little software as possible. I mean, a really easy way of thinking about software and code is that all code is debt, like all of it. And so it's like, you want to write as little as humanly possible. Wander at this point has grown to the point where we've like built everything. Our app, our backend, our property management software, like everything is like built internally, payments, etc. Obviously, we leverage like different providers like Stripe, etc. But there's a lot of complicated pieces inside of Wander, like credit and half now, half later, and like a whole bunch of shenanigans. So the point is like in the early days, though, that certainly wasn't the case. Like, it's not because we didn't have an incredible technical team and incredible technical leadership. It's because from the top, we were literally shouting, like all code is technical debt. Like, we want to write as little software as possible. We want to get this off the ground. We want to see if people actually want it. And then if they do, then let's write some fucking great ass software. So, to that end, like, as you scale, things get complicated, and you certainly need to have a team and leadership that understands like what great software and great systems mean. But in the early days, you're trying to get it out, you're trying to get it live, and you want to move really quickly to it. So I wouldn't be shy as a founder using third-party tools. And then eventually, if you end up becoming successful, then you're gonna have to scale, and you may have to change your architecture. That being said, if you're working on like a new technical product that off-the-shelf tooling doesn't exist for, then obviously you're gonna have to write it. But I think it's, if you're building like, again, like an e-commerce website, you want to sell like playing cards or something, like use Shopify, use whatever marketing tools and plugins that exist around it. But if you're building something new, like a new database, then like, yeah, like you're out of luck. So it just all depends on the product you're building.
Yeah, definitely. But is it that when you have technical founders, then they want to code things, they like to code, they like to build things, and that's where this originates from?
I would not say, like, I would actually say that there's like if you were to use like the IQ curve meme, right? Like, the one I'm talking about, on the far left, right, it would be write as little software as possible. And then in the middle, it would be like, we need this massively complicated project and architecture, and we need like distributed systems and whatever else. And then on the far right, it would be write as little software as possible. And so like, I think that like, obviously, like, creating incredible software and programming and everything else is a lot of fun. However, like, if you're business minded as well, then you will transcend to this idea of like, okay, I can go and I can build XYZ things. It's going to take this amount of time, this amount of resources. Why don't we simplify it for now? Because we're 5 people and we need to get to our Series A, and I'm not going to take my only engineering talent and focus them on building like out a new chat app or whatever else inside of my product. Because if you do a little bit of back of the napkin math, you can say, okay, it takes 5 engineers 6 months to go and build this feature, and by then we would die. We would run out of money. And so like even as a technical founder, you still need to be very vigilant and business minded about the realities of your situation. So that would also be my advice to like any like early co-founders in that type of situation, is like work backwards from the business milestones that you need to hit, understand your constraints very clearly, and then build a product that scales you through those constraints. Which, to be clear, what I'm talking about is effectively an operating model where it's like defining where you need to get to and what time period, you make certain forecasts and assumptions, and then you track those assumptions against reality. That being said, I don't recommend that exercise in the very earliest days because you have so little time. So you have 6 months to figure out how to get to $1 million in ARR or whatever. But that's definitely like the point that I would say is like when you're defining your roadmap, do some back of the napkin math, figure out how many resources you need and what the timeline is for certain features. And I think a lot of people will be, sort of surprised that the features they're building are going to take far longer and be far more expensive than they were originally anticipating. And that's also advice that I give all the time, especially to early stage founders, is like, hey, like I'm sure this product's going to be epic, but like you're running out of time and you're running out of cash. And so you kind of need to like switch gears. That's also why candidly in a startup, you have to work exceptionally hard, because like time is not your friend. The reason time isn't your friend is because you're losing money, right? A big public company that's making money, time is your friend, right? You're profitable. That means like the more time you're alive, the more profit you make, it's great. As a startup, you're losing money. And so you need to work exceptionally hard to sort of flip the script.
How would you manage scaling the product and delivering a great product?
Oh gosh. Scaling as an entrepreneur is a really fascinating thing. When you scale a company, what you have to look at is your unit economics. So are my unit economics positive and are they repeatable? And then the next question is, okay, if so, then what is the process in scaling them and how capital intensive is it? So when you go through that, you create effectively an operating model, or your plan, as like your board would call it, which is basically this giant spreadsheet with all the variables inside of the company tailored for your company that says, here are the things that we have to do month over month over month, the people we need to hire, the homes we need to add, different things to reach this, nirvana outcome, right? The interesting thing inside a model like that is that you're going to see numbers that don't make sense or are wrong. And then the question is, what product decisions you have to make or strategic decisions you have to make to change the course of that model? Because effectively what it's doing is forecasting your financial future. And so that's where you end up making product shifts that increase your margins, or tactical supply side shifts, or whatever else. And then from there, you're executing against it, and your boss, you basically add another boss, right? So for Wander, like my bosses are the employees, the customers, my board, my investors. And now there's another, which is like this spreadsheet. Like every day I'm in this spreadsheet going over every number, what tweaks do I need to make, et cetera, alongside obviously the more fun stuff like working with design and product and all that. So that's a big shift for founders as you scale. And obviously it's something that you're held to forever, right? There's a reason why there are earnings calls with public companies, right? And it's a bunch of analysts asking the CEO, like, how much did you grow? And did you hit plan? And whatever else. So it's certainly a shift that really all founders have to go through at some point if they're lucky enough. My advice is to do it sooner than later. Really, I would say as soon as you raise your Series A, if you aren't already, you should institute an operating plan and stick pretty closely to it.
You talked about the spreadsheet there and the operating plan. What should this operating plan really look like practically?
Yeah, so it's a very complicated spreadsheet, and it would be impossible for me to like describe it visually, like cell by cell. But you're going to have your overview, which will be things like your margin, key assumptions, those types of things. Again, everything's going to be built specifically for your business, for your product. And then inside of that, there's going to be effectively like month over month growth. So like what metrics need to be true, headcount, operating assumptions, costs, all those different things. And you track those all, and you track basically your projected against your actuals. And then what you're looking for is any delta. So let's say that your software costs, like your cloud costs, were projected at $10,000 a month, but it was $12,000, right? Now you have this $2,000 delta that you either need to reforecast for, which is not a good thing, or you want to cut your cloud costs and figure out how to do that. And then the question is, how do you cut your cloud costs? And all of a sudden now you're working with the engineering team on becoming more efficient. Maybe you're getting credits, which is sort of like a patchwork solution as opposed to like fixing any efficiencies. And so that's what causes a lot of your work. And what I mean by having another boss, right, is that you make all of these projections and assumptions in your operating plan, and something shows up red, and then you have to fix that red thing. And so you're effectively putting out these fires across your business, but the fires aren't like pure chaos. It's more like a literal guide to, is your startup thriving or dying? So it's certainly something I recommend. You could even try doing it in the early stages. I know it sounds boring, and it like candidly isn't fun to put together, but like it, for me at least, feels a little bit like a video game of like red versus green. Like you're always trying to be planned. You're always in it, always excited by it. And it's something that I'm very grateful to have such incredible seasoned board members around me that like really push for this level of operational rigor. I realize that a lot of startups don't necessarily have it yet, but it's certainly like one of the most valuable things that an early entrepreneur can do is understand like the importance of an operating plan. So dive in, do some research. You can find some examples online. Talk to any like, COOs that or whatever else. And who knows, right? Maybe at some point I'll put together some like public resources around it, but there are people who are way smarter at it than I am. And way more experienced. But it's something that every business has to do at some point. It's not something that they teach like in the early days of Y Combinator, for example. It's really, again, only something that you run into once you found product market fit and you're scaling.
I think how much of the assumption that you make based on those operational models, how much of it really goes as assumed?
How often are you hitting your projections? Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I'd say like hopefully most of the time, or you're beating plan. A lot of startups will miss plan and they'll have to make adjustments. They have to lay off people or whatever else. A lot of it depends on how good of a grasp you have on your business. A lot of it depends on how early stage you are. If you're just getting started, all of your assumptions are going to be wrong and you're going to be constantly reforecasting. You're probably reforecasting every month. But as you become more mature, you don't reforecast as often. Like in Wander's case, like we've been running with the same operating model for like the last 8 months. So like, no reforecasting, just like month over month hitting plan. But that being said, it's really difficult and it's a lot of work. And there are certain areas that will lag behind. Maybe your customer acquisition cost gets out of whack, or maybe you fail to hire the right number of sales reps. And so you miss your top line or whatever else. But the idea is that you then like figure out those gaps and you fill it and then you overcome it. And then all of a sudden you're on plan for the next month. So I would say that it's anyone who hits their plan 100% of the time is probably like, a little bit full of it. But it's certainly possible. And you really want to be as close to it as you can. Your goal is, especially like as you become like a public company, right, is that they're making all these projections and then they share those projections with the analysts. And then the earnings call comes around and they announce whether or not they had a beat or they hit it or they were below it. And that's what they're doing every single quarter.
Yeah.
And so it's like a lot of startups or a lot of companies will beat, right? They'll beat the projections, they'll beat the forecasts. A lot of them will not. And then the stock tanks. I mean, it's just like, you can see it play out every day. And that's what you need to be doing inside of your own startup. Except instead of the analysts in like the stock market, you have your board members who are like really paying attention. And then obviously you as the CEO need to be in it with your executive team. I mean, I review our plan and our current metrics every week with our entire executive team. So
how long do you think should a person work on an idea before it's like it will not work. Let's figure something else out.
Yeah. I mean, I think you need to be very candid about like the progress and like if you have product market fit or if you're building something that people want. I'll give you like a great story. So in the early days of Coder, we were building a consumer cloud-based IDE, right? So now that's like a pretty normal thing, right? You have companies like Replit and whatever else. When I started, right, like Coder raised its seed round at the same time that Replit raised its seed round, right? So like we were both starting at the same time. We were both building like a pretty similar product. And I'll never forget, we launched the product, we're building it out, and we hit about 60,000 users in the first 3 months, right? Really great growth. But when I went to turn on monetization for the product, no one was willing to pay at all. And what I saw is that the community that Coder had adoption in, specifically students, were unwilling to pay. And I decided that like at that point that the product was great and there was nothing I could do except adjust the course into enterprise, right? Adjust it into companies, build a product for large organizations who were willing to pay. And, you know, after a pivot and a lot of like ups and downs, you know, we landed like our first $1 million contract and we're off into the races. And so, you know, to that end, like we moved pretty swiftly. Like me and my co-founders moved pretty swiftly the moment we turned on monetization and no one was willing to pay us for compute to go and shift course and to change to a different model. You know, so that's what I would say is that like you have to be a realist. Like if you're building something and it's a great product and there's no more iteration to be done and still no one is willing to pay for it, then you need to shift pretty quickly. So I would say that's probably the greatest test for a new idea or a new product is to charge for it early. You know, it has to be feature complete or whatever else, or maybe customers will say they'll pay for it when they have certain features. But that's my advice, is charge for your product early. See if people are actually willing to give you money. And if they are, then you really have something. But if they aren't and the product's good, then you're kind of out of luck. You built a piece of art.
How should a founder really go the pricing?
Yeah, pricing is a very difficult question. So there's two variables. Number one is what is someone willing to pay? And then the other variable is what do you need to make in order for your unit economics to be positive and to have the right margin profile? So really the first thing is discovering what's the market clearing price for your product. You talk to a bunch of folks, you test around with pricing, you see where people are willing to transact. And then once you find that number, you like run an economic analysis to see like what are my margins and like do I actually make money from this? And ideally you do, right? And then you're off to the races. But a lot of times you won't. Like, for example, there are a lot of products that people would want if they were $1 and they just cost a hell of a lot more to make than $1. Like, you know, if I sold $2 for $1, then like a lot of people would want my product. So that's one of the big, really tricky things as well. What's cool is that you can make a lot of optimizations on your product. So let's say that you find something that people are willing to pay $50 for, but it costs you $40 to make it. It's like, those aren't great margins. But the question is then like, what changes and systems and like adjustments to our architecture and whatever else can I create? Or when I hit a certain scale, do these economics change? To be clear, I'm not a big fan of businesses that have to hit a certain scale for the unit economics to make sense, simply because I think like all great companies are like a series of positive unit economics that's like stacked on top of each other. But, you know, to that end, that's really it. You find your market clearing price. What is the customer willing to pay? You do an economic analysis to understand like your margins and if it's something that's sustainable or if there's a path to sustainability, and then, you know, you run with it. But there are certainly a lot of great ideas that don't exist in the world simply because they're too expensive.
Does your price correlate with you finding the product market fit too?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it depends like how good is the product and like what need are you filling, right? So the more valuable the product is to a user, the more that they're willing to pay for it. That being said, there's like a curve, right? So at the very top of your pricing curve, there may be, you know, very little users who are willing to pay for it at that price. And so there are a lot of products, and this is something that I don't think founders really think about. that have product market fit in a certain pricing band. For example, like a Tesla Model 3, right? A Tesla Model 3, if it costs $500,000, has no product market fit. No one is willing to buy that car. But if a Tesla Model 3 is priced at $10,000, now it has remarkable product market fit. Everyone's willing to buy that car. And so pricing is actually a huge part of your product market fit. And that's why I always use this example of market clearing price. What is the price for the product that there is enough people that they want to go and buy it? And so, to that end, it's something that I would very much think about, as an entrepreneur building a product. It's like, okay, I built this product, I monetize, and no one wants to pay for it. Well, it's like, have you tried dropping the price? Drop the price again, drop it again. And then if all of a sudden it takes off like gangbusters, hopefully your margin profile is high enough where it makes sense. Or, if not, you could be selling, $2 for $1 and you're out of luck. Say I have this apple and I want to sell this apple and I'm going to charge $100. And then someone walks up and they're like, that's way too expensive. And then you ask, how much would you pay? And they'd say $5. And then you're like, I don't want to sell it for $5. You can move on. And then someone else comes up to your apple cart and you say, hey, I want to sell this apple for $100. And they say, hey, that's way too expensive. I'll pay $4. And you're like, oh, $4 is cheaper than the last guy. Like, get out of here. You do that 100 times, you end up with some type of average. And the chart basically looks like you have a high end with like a high end of dots. And there's a small number of people who are willing to pay $10, $12 an apple. And then you have the low end, right, where everyone's willing to pay $1 an apple. And then somewhere in between is like your healthy margin where you have, 70%, gross margins and everything looks good. And, you end up selling the apples for $6. So that's how you do it. And you can do it with any product, whether it's a software product or a physical product or produce or anything else. And it's how the world works. Like, every single thing that we buy had pricing discovery. And if it was too expensive, then people walk away.
And is that how you define your TAM?
I mean, technically, yes. How many people are willing to pay for a product?
How do you think, is it good to have a larger TAM or a smaller one?
I mean,
in the start,
larger TAMs are always better than smaller TAMs. I think the mistake that's made is this idea that like a small TAM can become a big TAM over time. And so like that's one of the things that you want to play into is tailwinds. Like Wander operates in an absolutely massive TAM. I mean, short-term rentals is a massive industry, hundreds of billions of dollars of transaction volume, obviously supporting big public market caps like Airbnb. However, like I'll use a great example of Coinbase. When Coinbase first started, the crypto market was very small. And you would say that the TAM for Coinbase was very small. However, the TAM grew and Coinbase grew with it. So there's two options. You can either enter into a massive TAM or you can enter into a category that you think is going to grow with you. And obviously, if you can do that and seize a tiny market that then grows, I mean, that's a pretty powerful thing.
How have you seen the TAM for short-term rentals grow along with Wander?
Yeah, I mean, short-term rentals definitely have a tailwind. I mean, they're growing like anywhere between like 10 and 20% a year, just in terms of total supply, travel, etc. I do think that like companies like Wander are creating a lot of that, right? We're creating new products in the space. Like for Wander, effectively, it's an entirely like new dynamic where you're not reliant on some random third party. It's like a, operationally standard thing. Like every Wander you go to has the same bed setups, little Ghirardelli chocolate at the bedside table, kind of like a hotel. So it's a new product within the space. And obviously like something people love, and we're very, very lucky for that. But yeah, I mean, I running a company that has the wind at its back is much easier than the opposite. Like we're very fortunate that travel is like a growing space and it's getting a ton of love. Short-term rentals continues to grow. It's a massive TAM. We have a lot going for us. And a lot of that was in like my original assumptions, right? It's like, does this space have a tailwind behind it? There are certainly headwinds, right? There are macro headwinds that every startup, begins to face, right? Like rising interest rates, like more expensive capital, those different things. But, if you work really hard, you can grow through them. And if your industry has tailwinds, then it sort of like keeps you moving forward. But, a lot of industries obviously have, headwinds. that push really hard against it. So
What do you think was your biggest assumption that you took a large bet on that and then paid off or became a reality that you did not think would?
that I didn't think would.
Yeah.
So when Wander started, we owned all of the assets, right? And the idea was, let's prove the concept and then let's like scale within it. Like the economics should work, depending on interest rates. One of the things within that I never assumed was this idea that third-party capital, so third-party owners, would want to basically give Wander full control of their asset to operate and distribute on our platform. I never thought it was going to happen. Didn't make like any sense to me, which obviously in hindsight I was wrong. And I can see very clearly why I was wrong. But, it was something that like was brought up, and we have a virtue inside the company, which is we don't smother flames. It's this idea that if someone has an idea and they're really passionate about it, like you let them run with it. And so we did. And now like more than half the platform is in that business model, and it works phenomenally well, and the economics are great and the guest experience is great. So there are always those little moments in a startup where like, for Wander in that context, like we always knew that we were going to move in this direction at some point. I just didn't think it was going to be this early, and it was. And so it was really cool to drag that forward. And there are obviously tons of bets that ended up like paying off all across like building Wander as you would imagine. And there are bets that don't pay off, right? There are things that you're wrong with. I think the thing that makes like great companies and great leaders is that you have to be right the majority of the time, which is really, really difficult. That's like a classic Jeff Bezos saying, like, we are right a lot is like one of Amazon's executive virtues. And it's true. Like when you're building a startup, you only get so many swings. And so you have to be extremely thoughtful and be right a lot. And sometimes you're not, obviously, and you adjust and you keep moving forward.
What do you do when you're not right?
When I'm not right, I move super fast in fixing it. Because what happens is you make a decision and you're wrong. And now not only does the company stop moving forward, it starts moving backwards, right? You're burning cash, there are resources, like it's fucking bad. When you are wrong in a startup as a CEO, it's like very bad. And so you have to move incredibly quickly in not just fixing it, but coming up with a new strategy that starts moving the company forward again. So one of the operating principles that I've always done is this idea of hedging progress. So I will always have 2 or 3 things. If there's something mission critical, like a certain growth milestone, I will always have 2 or 3 ways of hitting it, so that if one of them fails, then I know that there are 2 others that have a shot. What's interesting is that once you find that thing that works consistently, then you don't need to hedge it as aggressively. So it's really only something you do in the very early days of a startup. But that's why Wander, at only 2.5 years old, seems to have made all this progress so quickly with so few setbacks, or somehow even when there is a big setback, like the market shifts or whatever else, the company still keeps moving forward. And the reason is because I'm an incredibly paranoid founder. And if I see a risk, I'm going to have 2 or 3 other ways for us to continue to grow just in case. Now, again, at a certain point, you have to become incredibly focused, and you can't afford to have all these hedges. And you also don't need to, right? If you have something that works and is repeatable, then you can lean into it. But while you're finding that, it's good to hedge progress. And it's something that I think is responsible for getting us to the stage we are now in such a short amount of time.
A lot of, based on this exact same point, a lot of people really give advice to early stage founders that do not have any plan Bs. You should only have plan As. Do you agree with that?
So there is certainly a lot of advice, which is like burn the boats, right? It's like have one plan and go with it. And like that's fine, right? Like you want to be committed, you want to be focused on like your first priority. However, if you have the bandwidth and you have the resources and you are unsure about that thing that you're burning the boats on, then like you should think about being a little bit smart. So like to give you an idea, if you have option A, and option A requires a certain amount of capital and a certain amount of time, and it requires all your capital and all your time, and that's what you think is the best option, and you can't do option A and option B together, then you should fully do option A. Burn the boats, go and execute. But if you do have enough capital and you do have enough time and you're not really sure about option A and you can think of option B and explore it at the same time, then you should explore both. Particularly if you're, again, really unsure that option A is actually going to work and pay off. And again, there have been so many times in Wander's early history where option A like exploded completely, but the company never stopped because I was smart enough to have option B going at the same time. And, we were able to transition to that and keep scaling without missing a beat. So it really depends. Candidly, it's so specific. But what I would say is, and where you should apply this idea of hedging progress, is anything related to growth or growing your team or growing your product or supply side or whatever else. A really good way of thinking about it is like when you're hiring a candidate, right? Like, do you just meet one candidate and you're like, this is the person and I'm going to just talk to them. I'm going to stop recruiting. I'm going to stop doing everything else. No, because you know that there's a high chance that they say no, or they want too much money or whatever else. So you recruit and you talk to 5 other people at the same time and you hedge progress, because even if candidate A says no, then you have a bunch of other people who could take their spot. You can apply that same methodology to a lot of product decisions, a lot of growth strategies. Raising capital is another great example. If you have one interested investor, does that mean that you don't go and talk to another 20? Like, of course you go and talk to the rest. So this idea of constantly hedging progress is something that I think is incredibly important in the early stages of a company, and also obviously beyond.
Yeah, definitely. This has been incredible. You make really good points. I think a lot of that's what we're talking about Keith Raboy there. He has a lot of like the contrarian part of it. I think that's what about him what sticks out to me. I think you possess that as well, like contrarian way of thinking, which goes against the industry norm. That
well, that's remarkably kind to be compared in any way, shape, or form. I don't think that I'm a fraction as brilliant or successful as he is, but it means the world. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, definitely. I think you both are cool people. I've got one of you now. I have to get the other on the pod. I think awesome. This has been incredible. I think we'll take a hard stop here. This has been like mind blowing for me. Anything you'd like to say?
No, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I love the hustle and love that we were able to make the time for it. And I wish you all the best in the journey. I think it's going to be incredible. I look forward to all the conversations that you're going to have and people you get to talk to. So keep at it, keep grinding away, and don't be worried about the people you piss off. So
that worries me a lot.
You'll be fine. Trust me. Again, anyone who gets upset about being contacted for a podcast is there are lots of things to be angry about. That's not one of them. So I'm really excited for you, and for anyone who's still listening, thank you so much for taking the time and energy.
Yeah. One question which I usually like to end with is, I've been into VCs and startups since I was 11. What do you think is one fact that would blow 11-year-old me mind?
God, there are so many things and advancements and things that have changed. I mean, I bet that 11-year-old wouldn't have thought that we would be talking right now. So I think that's pretty exciting. I bet 11-year-old you wouldn't have been thinking that like general AI was only a few years away and that like robots were taking over the world. I mean, there's so many things and advancements in technology and startups, and it's remarkably exciting and also a little bit scary. This is the first time in technology where I'm having difficulty keeping up, which is quite the statement. Like I dig through what are the latest advancements, what are the newest like things, and like this is the first time where it's like a water hose of like, fire hose of information. You have new models, new technologies, new breakthroughs, new white papers. Like it's wild, and it's only going to continue accelerating. So this is the most exciting time in technology ever, and I think that a lot of what was science fiction is going to become reality over the next 5 years. And I really don't think that people are ready for it. I think the majority of people have no idea like what's coming. I mean, like I think that artificial general superintelligence is only 5 years away. And then it's like, then what? Like, what do we do? Like, it just, does everything for us. So it's a really interesting time. It's really exciting. There's a lot going on. And all you can do is hang on, be a good person, smile, laugh, enjoy the sunshine, enjoy the fresh air, all that sort of fun stuff, and do your best. So
and feel the AGI.
Yeah, a little bit of fear.
All right, and this was incredible. Thank you so much for doing this.
Amazing. Absolutely my pleasure.